Racist banks crash the housing market. Jesse Smalley is enjoying the limelight. Pocahontas thinks Google's the new Ma Bell, and Trump sucks at negotiating. I'm Anthony. This is Allow Me to Retort, and I record these videos pantsless. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video here. I've got a few little topics that are all over the place that I want to cover. But let's just jump right on into it. We've been seeing a lot in the news, especially out of California, about how the war on drugs is kind of racist and apparently targets black people. And instead of talking about the war on drugs, I like to point to something else that's been debunked. Blacks are unfairly targeted by banks before the housing crisis, says ACLU. The American Civil Liberties Union says that blacks were unfairly targeted before the crash in the housing market, which kind of led to them getting approved for all these loans that they could not afford, and therefore having to end up closing on their houses, and ended up, leading us to like the recession and the great housing market crash of 2008. None of that is true, actually. I have a follow-up here. Big banks were forced to give loans to these lower income families. Actually, they were forced to give loans to them because they were all kind of government incentives, and you had certain quotas to meet, or else you would fall out of good standing. So actually, the very people crying racism, the Democrats, these are all democratic liberal policies that caused the housing market crash, forcing banks to give loans to people who could not, in their current circumstances, afford those loans or pay them off eventually. And so therefore you've got lots of foreclosed houses, you've got lots of banks not getting money that they're owned, and you've got, recession material. And there's nothing racist about that either. There's nothing racist about being honest. Let's just quite frankly say that in 2008, blacks were just not making as much money as other races were. Here I have a chart from the Economic Policy Institute that shows in 2008 blacks were at the bottom of the totem pole, yet they were getting approved for these loans that they definitely should not have been. They were making an average household income of $37,000. While you've got Hispanics even making more in 2008. You've got whites, then you've got your Asians at the top of the chart, which people always like to leave out those Asians. They don't count as a minority because they make too much money. It doesn't suit the agenda. I'm saying all this to say is the housing market crash was definitely something brought on by liberal policies and some of these social programs that you're seeing kind of brought back up today. People like Bernie Sanders and AOC pushing very, very hard to get us some social justice in here that kind of deletes the social inequality. But the problem is it doesn't always seem to work out that way when you're giving out things for free and people don't have a drive or incentive or the knowledge to work hard for it and sustain those things. You see what happened here with the housing market. You see houses being foreclosed and people not being able to get paid back, and then therefore you have people who worked in real estate and people who are looking for new homes, and people who could afford new homes suffered because of ill implemented social programs. So next time you hear that big banks targeted black people and caused the housing market crash, you know better now. Moving right on past that, let's talk a little bit about Jesse Smalley. Jesse Smalley, he's in the news, or he's trying his best to stay in the news. He's now said he will allow cameras to be inside the courtroom. He claims he wants it to all be seen. He wants the truth to be known. He wants it to be obvious. However, the Chicago Police Department is now charging Jesse with at least 16 different counts and crimes. His lawyer is claiming that that's way too harsh. Jesse doesn't deserve that. They're going overboard. And this is where I think the Chicago PD need to step their game up, really, because I'll be honest, Jesse's case is kind of lacking evidence on both sides. He's lacking evidence that this was a malicious crime taking place against him, but the Chicago PD are also lacking the evidence, or at least they haven't come forward with all the evidence to prove that Jesse is 100% guilty of this. This is the face of an insane person. Jesse really thinks he's probably going to get away with this, and that's the ridiculous part about it. He thinks just by mentioning that he's black and gay, he's going to get a pass for this atrocious crime. But I got news for you, Jesse. You're not. We don't forget. We're going to make sure you are held accountable for your crimes and for your wasting time of the good men and women of Chicago. Elizabeth Warren, aka Pocahontas, is on the warpath against Google, Apple, Facebook. She thinks that they're the new Ma Bell. She wants to break up these companies, something like with what happened with Bell South way back in the day. Problem is, Elizabeth Warren has no idea about how technology works and how the future is heading. Alphabet owns all these companies that are Google companies, and so it's essentially already broken up in a way. But they're certainly not a monopoly. Google's not the monopoly on search. They're not the monopoly on phones. They're not the monopoly on content consumption. So I'm not sure where she gets the idea that she wants to break them up. Same with Amazon. Although Amazon is getting its hands in a lot of things, they're not quite the monopoly on groceries. They're not the monopoly on online shipping and purchasing. They're not even the monopoly on, well, a lot of things that people don't know is Amazon also offers up the server business. They're not even a monopoly on there. They're a huge tech giant, but there is competition and healthy competition there. Same with Facebook. Facebook owns what? Instagram and some other ins and outs, but once again, Facebook is in no way a social media monopoly. So Elizabeth Warren's way out of line here trying to break these companies up. All she's doing is pushing us more and more towards socialism, I believe, by trying to interfere with capitalism and market growth. If she really wants to tear some companies apart, how about she go back to the big giants, your Comcast, which is owned by Time Warner, and Comcast and Time Warner, that's pretty much all the cable phone companies right there. That's half the country has got Comcast, the other half has got Time Warner. You've got AT&T and DirecTV and Dish Network and all these other companies who are working together. That's who she needs to be tearing apart instead of focusing on tech giants, Google and Amazon and Facebook, who on the regular do things that make this world better. Google works with the government whenever it can. Google's always implementing new technology to better society for human beings as a whole. Amazon is also bringing in new programs. Sure, Amazon might not be the greatest thing for small businesses, but that's Walmart. Amazon is just the new Walmart. A lot of people complain about Walmart coming in and ruining it for small businesses, but here we are, we're still thriving, we're still advancing. When new technology comes in and shakes up the market in a good way, it pushes small business owners, it pushes end users to try and achieve and adapt to the newest next thing. That's called progress. Splitting up companies like Amazon and Facebook because she thinks they're making too much money, or because she thinks they're a monopoly, which is completely untrue, is just ridiculous, and I think it's impeding on progress. Elizabeth Warren should definitely stay in her lane. Now, here's the big whoopsies. Here's the big news here. Satellite images reveal hidden North Korea missile bases. This comes from CNN. After the summit with Trump and Kim Jong-un, where he assured us that, North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat. They may not, we haven't proved that these facilities are nuclear, but these are definitely long-range missile facilities. And one of the things that North Korea does is because they're not signed on to the peace accords like the rest of the UN or anything like that. They don't have to abide by the same laws and things we do of war. They can build these missile facilities very near civilian places, which makes them, untargetable, basically, by certain laws, international laws of wars, that we won't target these heavily populated civilian areas. So you can have a strip mall and a missile base right next to each other in North Korea, making it very, very difficult for us to attack it without looking like we're some kind of heinous animals. And to be honest, the whole reason I voted for Trump, one of the whole reasons that I was such a big proponent for Trump, is that it looked like he was going to be friends with Russia and that we were going to blow North Korea off the map. I'm sorry, I know that's not peace talk, but North Korea is absolutely just a garbage place. The people there might be fine, the victims of, this tyrannical force, but their leadership is absolute garbage, and we don't need to be bargaining with them at all. There's no room for bargaining with North Korea. They're essentially terrorists who haven't made a move yet. You're talking about the country which has its people wake up and used to saying death to America. Kim Jong-un and his whole family, their whole legacy has always been very anti-America. So for Trump to even be wasting time and saying, he's such a good person, and giving all of this, kissing of the butt to Kim is absolutely ridiculous, and it's harming us because you can't trust them. Honestly, you can't trust them one bit. Is the U.S. entering a new arms race with Russia? When Obama was in office, he accused Russia of violating the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which put in a bunch of guidelines about how far your missiles could go and what type of missiles you could use and what type of missiles you were able to construct in your country. Since then, we've been on thin ice with Russia about this, and Trump doubled down and also accused them of violating this policy. Then Russia accused us of violating this policy. Then Trump said, well, okay, if you're going to keep violating this policy, we're going to tear it up and throw it out. Russia claims they were never violating the treaty, but with Trump being so upset and throwing it out of the window, Russia is now like, okay, no more treaty, and now they are creating new nuclear weapons and new long-range missiles, and now America is also creating new nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, and we essentially have an arms race. And China, who was never even involved in the treaty, they're still a far cry from what Russia and America have, but China is very capable of producing nuclear weapons, and they are now also ramping up their program. So you're seeing a three-way nuclear race. You know, everyone's building and constructing, and I think this is poor negotiation on Trump's side, along with negotiating with the likes of Kim in North Korea. You are now upsetting Russia, who is a powerhouse, and I think Russia could have been a very strong ally. It looked like Russia and America could have got along very well in the very beginning days during the election, along with the negative media coverage of Russia and Trump kind of backing out and backing down to stand up for our United States ties with Russia. I think it's making situation worse. So now we have North Korea, who we can't trust, who we're being friends with, and Russia, who may have not been the most moral, friend to have, but it would definitely have been a friend, and I'm all about putting America first. So if that means shaking hands with Russia versus shaking hands with the literal devil, North Korea, then I'd much rather shake hands with Russia and work with them in order to kind of bring prosperity to both nations. I don't see prosperity coming to both nations while we work with North Korea. I just don't see what North Korea has to offer us other than tyranny. Thanks for watching my video. Hopefully I'll see you guys next week. I'm Anthony. This is Allow Me to Retort. Goodbye.